Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, December the 26th, 2025. Today there is a trine between the moon in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer. Not exactly an unusual aspect, but it's an aspect that I haven't looked at in detail before. So in this video, that's what I'm going to do. So end of this video, I'll be considering, what the moon trine Jupiter might mean, and also looking at some examples of, how it operates. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and I Ching for today, Friday, December the 26th, 2025, which is of course Boxing Day. So here is the chart for today. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And so as far as this chart is concerned, it's really not so different from yesterday. I mean, the moon was in Pisces yesterday. The moon was in mutual reception to Jupiter yesterday, same as today. Okay, yesterday we had some sextiles. We had, moon in Pisces sextile Venus, the Sun, and Mars. Now the moon has moved on, and it's moving on towards a trine of Jupiter. Now, of course, I'll be talking about this moon trine Jupiter in detail at the end of this video, but suffice it to say, it's logically pretty fortunate moon trine Jupiter. I mean, it's we've got a situation where the moon, which is sort of process action in the chart, is trine Jupiter, the most fortunate planet in the sky, and also Jupiter is exalted, and Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. Yeah, and they're in trine. So what could be better? And so it might be a lucky day when when things happen. When if you put your effort into something, it can work, but there are certainly no guarantees there. And if we look at some events which took place when Moon makes a trine to Jupiter, well, the ones I've chosen are, in many cases, unfortunate. They don't work out, but there may be particular reasons why that happened. Maybe we have to look at what signs the two planets are in. So in this case, we've got Jupiter in its exaltation. We've got Moon in Pisces in mutual reception to Jupiter. So it's when you're trying to evaluate an aspect, you perhaps shouldn't just look at the aspect. You need to look at the signs in which your planets are in. But as far as today is concerned, I think one should regard that Moon trine Jupiter as being fortunate, as allowing good things to happen if you make the effort. You can't assume with Jupiter that everything will be given to you on a silver plate. We have to be talking about something which is vaguely possible, and you make it possible. It's a standard thing. You can't win the lottery unless you fill in a lottery ticket. Although I'm not advocating that you fill in a lottery ticket. I don't think astrology works quite that way, but you have to put yourself in a position where you can take advantage of something going your way. Moon also makes a square to Mercury. So Moon in Pisces makes a square to Mercury. So Moon squares Mercury, then it makes a trine to Jupiter. So Moon square Mercury is an aspect that might be ever so slightly agitated. Mercury's in Sagittarius, Moon in Pisces. It works in a different way to Mercury in Sagittarius. Perhaps we're trying to say something, but we're not quite sure how to approach it. We want to be spontaneous. I mean, it is quite spontaneous. You would have thought Moon in Pisces square Mercury in Sagittarius, but somehow we might sort of read the room incorrectly. But it's only a Moon square Mercury. It doesn't last forever, and then the moon does move on, makes that trine to Jupiter. And as I've just said, I think the moon trine Jupiter on balance is a pretty fortunate aspect. Additionally, we have got Venus semisextile Pluto. Venus is in Capricorn, making a semi-sextile aspect to Pluto, 30-degree aspect. So Venus and Pluto both in signs ruled by Saturn, and with that semi-sextile, you might think that that says something about relationships. I mean, Venus is a planet of relationships, and it could be about issues relating to independence. I mean, you think of Pluto in Aquarius, or maybe control. We want to be in control, but at the same time, we don't want to draw too much attention to ourselves. Or there may be issues of power, trying to assert ourselves, but it's not necessarily easy because it's a semi-sextile, and semi-sextiles can be hard work. They're not quite like squares and oppositions, but still there's something we're trying to bring into our life with that Venus sextile Pluto, and it could be difficult, but it's certainly possible. It's more than possible. It's something that you should definitely be striving for. So that is the view for New York, setting the day's chart for New York. So let's set the chart for Sydney, Australia. So Sydney, Australia, the moon is earlier in the sign. The moon is at 12 degrees. Is at 12 degrees Pisces. That means that the moon trine Jupiter, may take quite a longer to develop. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, it may not be until quite late in the day or into tomorrow, Saturday, that the moon trine Jupiter really starts to activate. And I think overall, if you are in Sydney, Australia, or in Australasia in general, I mean, the moon is probably still in range of the sextiles, certainly the sextile to Mars, and so moon sextile Mars may say quite a lot about your day, particularly at the beginning of the day. If you want to do something, you want to be constructive about it, I think that you can make good progress, but you have to get on with it. You can't hang around forever because you might miss your moment. So overall, probably if you're in Australia or New Zealand, might be ever so slightly quieter than if you're in the Americas. But again, I don't think there's a huge amount of difference. The point is, we've still got moon in Pisces in mutual reception to Jupiter. And then we have got the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And if you look at things from a heliocentric view, I mean, I'm not saying there's a huge amount going on. You might say that the Earth is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So if you look at, there's Venus and Mars. So, what is the midpoint between Venus and Mars? Heliocentric Venus at 29 Sagittarius, heliocentric Mars at 11 Capricorn. So what's the midpoint between the two? Probably about 5 degrees Capricorn. So the Earth is opposition the Venus-Mars midpoint. So you kind of have a merging of Earth opposition Venus and Earth opposition Mars. And if you sort of bring them together, you might say that is about the desire to, perhaps a desire to be attractive, struggling to be attractive, struggling to be influential. It may not be easy. And with the Earth starting to make an opposition to Mars, in the process of trying to get people's attention, to get noticed, well, we might create the wrong impression, and what we thought was an attempt to create harmony may, in certain instances, do the opposite. So that may be a bit of a problem, that Earth being on the Venus-Mars midpoint, but it's mitigated by the fact that Mercury is trine Jupiter. So Mercury in Scorpio, heliocentric Scorpio, making a trine to Jupiter in heliocentric Cancer. So when you've got Mercury trine Jupiter, well, it ties in with the fact that geocentrically we've got moon trine Jupiter. So Mercury trine Jupiter is about being able to communicate in a fairly spontaneous way. And there is also a certain optimism to Mercury trine Jupiter. It's perhaps all around us even. I mean, I know that things are supposedly falling to pieces. I mean, that's what we're told, isn't it? If we read the newspapers or the online equivalent. But maybe this Mercury trine Jupiter today might provide some late sort of Christmas optimism. There's a way of seeing events in a positive light. It's not all doom and gloom. And so we need to perhaps link this with Moon trine Jupiter. The fact that geocentrically Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception with each other. Do try to focus on the positives as well as the negatives. I find that particularly difficult. That's a difficult piece of advice for me to follow, maybe. But even if I can't follow it, maybe you can. I know I'm being sort of hypocritical there, but you're supposed to follow your own advice. But sometimes I'm pretty bad at it. But still, I think you should try to be positive. I think that by looking at the good things going on around you, you just might notice something. And if you put your energy into the good, that may be a way of really making the most of the day's energies. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. And there's really not much going on today. Nothing really exact except for those aspects I talked about. Moon square Mercury, Moon trine Jupiter, Venus semi-sextile Pluto. So maybe that this is going to be reflected in what I say for the 12 signs. So anyway, these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, December the 26th, 2025. Aries, it's another day when quite possibly you don't want to put too much effort into things. You would rather just be yourself and not feel that there is any pressure. I mean, that would be the ideal situation. I mean, you still are feeling the fact that we have got these three planets in Capricorn pretty close to one another. Sun, Venus, Sun, Mars in the sign. So some Arians may take the view that Christmas is over. It's Friday. Maybe it's a normal day. I think in the United States it's a normal day. So get on with it. Enough of the Christmas celebrations. They're over. Time to be focused. I mean, that might be how you feel about things, and I think in a general sense, Aries, between now and the end of January, you are ambitious and you want to make an impression. But the question is, how successful are you going to be today? I think if you're trying to create a public impression, trying to engage with other people, get them to take you seriously, which I think at some level is something you might want, you may not be especially successful. I don't think you're going to be quite in the mood. I mean, you might like to be in the mood, but can you force yourself to act in a particular way? Particularly if the raw material that you need is simply not available. So if you try too hard to make things happen, if you try too hard to be an Aries extrovert, well, you might be disappointed. On the other hand, if you focus on what you can do, on what is possible, not feeling that you have to draw a huge amount of attention to yourself, then I think it might be a different picture. I think that in your own quiet way, Aries, I think that you can, you get a lot done, and you may even have a bit of luck. After all, there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Jupiter. Moon in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer. That trine aspect is going to affect all of us. But the question is, how is that luck and good fortune going to manifest? I don't think it's going to manifest in a public setting. It's going to be what you do in your own private way and the preparations you make, which don't necessarily need anyone's help. In fact, I would have said, that the less help you get, the better, because when you've got other people around you, you're trying to get assistance and cooperation from them. Somehow they may not quite be able to deliver. And perhaps another thing, Aries, you need to think about as you contemplate the future, particularly as you contemplate 2026, is how do you relate to an ever-changing world? The world is certainly changing. It's changing, and to an extent, the key to being successful is to cope with that change and to be able to go with it and also to understand it. And so it might be a good idea for many Arians to perhaps read the papers, ask yourself, where is the economy going? That's an important question for many of us. And perhaps look beyond your own private sphere, but in a low profile kind of way. You don't need anyone's help. You're just trying to work out what kind of planet you are living on. Taurus. I think Taurus, it looks like being a reasonable day. I'm not saying that it's going to be super exciting. I don't think it's going to be super exciting for anyone, because it's not that kind of day. I mean, I think there is this focus on this trine between the moon and Jupiter. Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception, and with this Moon-Jupiter mutual reception, your ability to fit in is probably going to be quite good. I mean, you don't have to completely fit in. I'm not saying that you have to follow anyone else's lead, but if you want to fit in, if you want to be a part of the group, if you want to, for example, enjoy the company of your friends, well, you very much can. And so if you can socially be very effective, and at the same time, if it's something you want to say, I think you're going to be able to say it in a way that is smooth and shows a degree of understanding and perhaps sympathy. I mean, you have to sympathize, with other people and their needs, but I don't think that you're going to do anything that sort of rocks the boat. So if you want to have a socially successful day, within the limits of whatever your situation is, I think you very much can. But there is this question about what you are thinking. What are you privately thinking? There is you as a social actor, but there's also your private thoughts, and this is something I was really talking about yesterday as well. So this is there is this question about whether there was a huge amount of point in having a reading for today as well as yesterday because of the similarities, but there is a slight difference. I mean, the moon has moved on from the sextiles to Venus, Sun and Mars. It's now making that trine to Jupiter, and that's something that I think needs to be talked about, needs to be mentioned at least. But there could also be your own private negativity. I mean, Taurians can be negative, there's no doubt about that. Particularly if they're left to their own devices. You can decide to maybe focus on one thing, and that one thing doesn't seem great, it just gets you, and it may not have anything to do with you. It may be something you notice, and you notice it, and you can't help it, you can't unnotice it, and you think that that's not good, and you might be thinking ahead. How could things develop? Well, they could develop badly. I mean, you might think they could develop badly, and that might sort of get you into a situation where it's just difficult to be positive. But why would this be the case, and how does this fit in with the fact that we've got Moon trine Jupiter? There is a fundamental contradiction there between positivity and negativity. I think that you're more likely to be positive, and you're more likely to have an optimistic view if you are with other people. if you are on your own, I think that there may be this negative push, a feeling that you start to think about how things can go wrong, and you might sort of dwell on rather grim subjects. Doesn't mean to say it's going to be unpleasant. There is always a place, isn't there, for having sort of thoughts of doom and gloom, and sort of almost enjoying the doom and gloom in sort of rather sort of bleak Wagnerian kind of way. And so if you want to do that, you can, up to a point, but you don't want to be too negative. There is a point where negativity just becomes self-defeating. So you do get that balance right. And overall, Taurus, I would just urge you to concentrate on the moon trine Jupiter. And you don't need to have other people around you. You don't need to be with friends and others to enjoy moon trine Jupiter, but I think that it certainly helps. Gemini, you are not isolated and disconnected. You are very much linked with the planet, with the cosmos, and what happens in one part of the cosmos inevitably has an impact on you. And you notice things. You notice that things aren't always going well in some part of the world, and you see it. I think I mentioned this yesterday. I mean, you cannot isolate yourself, and you're very aware of perhaps what other people are experiencing. And if you're aware of what other people are experiencing, that could in some way, but it could diminish your own happiness if you're aware that other people are having a bad time. And the question is there a point in having empathy, especially if you're a Gemini, or rather, is there a point in having too much having too much empathy? I mean, Gemini is not a sign that is particularly known for its empathy. Of course, everyone has empathy, but it's not a sign, like, I don't know, Cancer and Pisces that one regards as being super empathetic. No, I mean, Gemini has other priorities, and so if you do get too empathetic, if you do get maybe too emotional, that could be out of character. And if it's out of character, then potentially it could get out of control. So don't think that necessarily that there are things you can do to solve the world's problems. Even if you're aware that someone is, or not just someone, I mean, a group of people are suffering. I mean, you could, for example, feel better about it by giving a bit of money to some charity which is focused at those towards people who are suffering. It doesn't have to be very much money. It's perhaps a symbolic gesture to show that you are integrated. But you don't have to follow that advice. I don't even know if it's advice. It's just a suggestion. And besides, Gemini, you have got other things to worry about. Worry? No, I don't even mean the word worry. There should be other things on your agenda. There is a trine between Moon and Jupiter, and this trine between Moon and Jupiter for you could actually be very useful. I mean, it could be about you making the decision that that Christmas is over. It's now time to be serious and to do things which promote your own ambitions. It's okay to be ambitious if you have the chance. So whatever you're trying to create, whatever you're trying to get off the ground, if you happen to be working today, then that moon trine Jupiter is especially fortunate, and it means that you really can get things together, and you can be serious, because the moon is starting to make a conjunction to Saturn, so it's makes a trine to Jupiter and then moves on to the conjunction of Saturn. And I think for you, that moon conjunct Saturn, as you move into the weekend, could be very useful, because it means that you can get your priorities right. So if you want to do something and you decide it's important, you don't have to get sidetracked by the sort of the whole aftermath of Christmas and people perhaps putting expectation on you that you should do nothing in particular. No, I think, Gemini, in an ideal world, there will be things that you want to do, and if they relate to your own aims, your ambitions, maybe your job or your career, I think that would be a very good thing. One other thing: the Moon is making a square to Mercury. That Moon square Mercury comes before the Moon trine Jupiter. So there may be a moment today where you do feel agitated, where you don't quite know what to do, and it may be related to your own sense of empathy, what I was just talking about. You getting worried about something, getting worried about someone else. Perhaps there's a time when you are starting to engage with other people's problems rather than your own, and it's not necessarily very constructive. But then you move on, you move into that Moon trine Jupiter, and then the day really starts to kick in a fortunate sense. Cancer. I'm optimistic about today, because the Moon is making a trine to Jupiter, and Moon trine Jupiter, all things being equal, it's a terrific aspect. I'll be talking about Moon trine Jupiter, in greater detail at the end of the video, but it certainly has an impact on you. I mean, Jupiter is in Cancer, it's in your sign, and Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, Moon making a trine to Jupiter, and so that means that you can be positive and you can see how things can work out in your favor. And so you're feeling good about yourself, hopefully, and good about your prospects. So, it may turn out to be a happy Christmas, even though it's now Boxing Day. And, the Moon, additionally, is making a conjunction to Saturn. And I think that conjunction to Saturn isn't such a bad thing. I think that it does create some structure, and it may allow you to get the right kind of support, because I don't think, Cancer, that you have to do necessarily everything on your own. If you can get some help, I think that would be great. But you also need to be moving beyond things. You don't want to be stuck in one place, to be obsessed with one reality, when there are other realities that you might be able to tune into. So, Cancer, if you can focus some of your time, or rather some of your energy, on your spiritual pursuits, or at least on your aspirations, because the way it is now doesn't have to be the way it always will be. And if you can elevate yourself to a new level, I think that would be something that would really be useful, and arguably would be in accordance with your destiny. And it is not a time for Cancerians to be obsessing about small details, noticing that this is wrong and that is wrong, and that doesn't make sense. It is instead a time for moving above and beyond. And I do think that this Moon trine Jupiter should help you in that direction. And don't get too agitated. I mean, before the Moon makes a trine to Jupiter, it makes a square to Mercury, and so Moon square Mercury might be about you, Cancer, just getting worked up about something. You want something to be done right. You ask too many questions, and it just grinds everything to a standstill, and that's not helpful. But so, as far as is possible, move towards that Moon trine Jupiter. And Moon trine Jupiter, it's a lucky aspect. So if you try your hand at something, which is reasonable, I mean, you don't want to do anything crazy or risky. I mean, why? There's no point. But if you try your hand at something where you've got a reasonable chance of success, and a reasonable chance of showing maybe how clever you are, then I think that you can really make a lot of progress. So, Cancer, I don't want to go on for too long. I think that today overall can be pretty fortunate. I mean, it should be fortunate. So have a great day, because I think that really is possible. Leo, nothing is entirely simple. I mean, you know that, and this is a time when you're aware that complications can mount, pretty quickly. You think things are straightforward when you realize that actually they're not. But that doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. And it could be, Leo, that if you want things to be simple and straightforward, then they're going to end up being complicated. If you accept that things are complicated, then in the end things are going to turn out to be simple. So perhaps, Leo, you should go into today thinking that things could be problematic, that there are things going on under the surface that you can't understand. You'll try to understand, you'll try to ask the right questions, but still it's just hard. And with that sort of rather gritty approach, Leo, I think you'll be able to really get to grips with the day and its challenges. And the more you get into something, the more questions you ask, the more you're prepared to sort of move beyond surface appearances. I just think the easier it's going to be. So generally, that should be your approach. And additionally, Leo, there's just something about you that is interesting. You might not feel yourself to be interesting, but I think you are interesting. And people are going to want to know more about you. And it might be simply that there's something about you that is quite sort of attractive. That people want to have you around, and that might be linked with the fact that the Sun is still on the Venus-Mars midpoint. I mean, it's just the Sun. It is stuck on the Venus-Mars midpoint. I mean, I don't know whether you're noticing this, but astrologically, in theory, the Sun is stuck on this midpoint, and this Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint, should give a boost to your charisma. So don't feel that you need to do things on your own. Don't feel that no one cares, that no one's interested in you. I think some people are interested in you, and there's something about you that is fundamentally attractive. And I mean, I know I've been mentioning this quite a lot, but it's positive. I think I should reinforce it and suggest that you do really sort of give it your best shot. But maybe it's a kind of attractiveness that needs a bit of preparation. You can't just assume that everything will just work out easily and simply. You've got to make an effort on how to present yourself, and I think if you can do that, then you come over as someone who is influential. And as far as today is concerned, this ability to go under the surface, perhaps to be, or at least appear to be, a complicated person. I mean, I know you're not a complicated person, really, but if you give the impression of being a complicated person, not revealing everything, in fact, by keeping things to yourself, you are really giving a boost to your power. Because, you just give the impression that you've got things that other people want. Other people want to be a part of it. So that could be just a way the day manifests, though maybe, Leo, you don't want to be involved with anything or anyone. That, I think, would be quite understandable. In which case, you can still do useful work. If you're completely on your own, then I'm sure you've got questions. I'm sure that there are things that you want to discover and understand. And so Leo, really try to give it your best shot. And if something isn't clear, you're confused about something, well, keep going. In the end, I think that you can really uncover some very useful material. Virgo, I don't know what you're doing today. Obviously, I don't know anything about your circumstances, but we can't avoid the fact that, like yesterday, the moon is in Pisces. So the moon in Pisces, well, obviously the moon in Pisces is in your opposite sign, and so when the moon is in Pisces, that means that you've got to consider the other. What are other people doing? What are other people up to? And you have to make an effort to understand. You shouldn't just take people at face value, because there might be other things going on. So yes, see what people are doing. That doesn't mean to say you have to sacrifice your independence. And it might be the case that you have more freedom if you understand what other people are doing, because in that way you can sort of adjust your approach, and you can perhaps anticipate what another person is going to do next. And the moon in Pisces is making a trine to Jupiter. So moon trine Jupiter is a fairly fortunate fortunate aspect. It is, of course. It has to be. That's theoretically what the moon Jupiter is. Theoretically, it is fortunate, particularly when the moon is in Pisces and Jupiter is in Cancer. Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. And also, from a Virgo perspective, Pisces and Cancer are quite sociable signs. They are about other people, relating to other people, getting on with other people, not just other people one-to-one, but other people as a group. So as far as is possible, Virgo, I would suggest that you have a sociable day. It might not necessarily be what you want. I think part of you would like to just do things your way and not have to worry about the rest of the world. But I think the direction of travel should be towards other people, trying to understand other people, trying to perhaps see what other people have got to offer. And in the process, don't get too agitated if things happen that you weren't expecting. The moon is making a square to Mercury, because Mercury is your ruler. And so if you've got moon square Mercury, yeah, that might make you agitated. It might make you just annoyed. And there's a slight danger that you show this annoyance. And I would therefore suggest that you try to be tolerant and easygoing. And if something happens that you weren't expecting, if someone does something that you don't approve of, don't let it get you down. Just dismiss it all with a smile, and also perhaps take the view that if someone does something or says something you don't like, or that you react badly to, or at least you internally react badly to, maybe it's just a challenge. Maybe it's a challenge you need. Perhaps you've been too focused on yourself recently, and now you're starting to be aware of what is going on in the social world, and you can at least make the effort to understand it and not pass judgment. Libra. Venus is making a semi-sextile to Pluto, and it's quite an obscure aspect, you could say. I don't think people talk too much about semi-sextiles, but it's an exact semi-sextile. It involves Venus. Venus is your ruler, and so with this Venus semi-sextile Pluto, there might just be things going on which you're not entirely comfortable with, and you perhaps get annoyed or sort of irritated. That could happen, or it's just instead something that you have to take into account, that you part of you just doesn't want to take into account. And it may connect with fundamentally who you are. We've got, Venus in Capricorn. Okay, that says something about how you are presenting yourself, what your priorities are, and it may well be, with Venus in Capricorn, you're trying to be fairly low profile. Maybe you don't want to do too much. You're maybe happy where you are, but Pluto is a challenge. Pluto is challenging you to go further, to take something which should be a fundamental part of who you are and to really make it part of yourself. But you don't seem to want to. And it might just be a creative challenge. And, being creative, doing something that makes you stand out is not necessarily something you want to do. Perhaps because you're happiest, right where you are. Why cause problems? Why not just let everything pass? But Venus sextile Pluto is saying, no, there is something you should be doing. Something you should be doing which does relate to who you are, what you can do, and what your potential is. So I would have said Venus sextile Pluto could be about pushing yourself to do something that you kind of don't want to do, but privately you're good at it, and you could do something really exceptional if you gave it the chance. So I think that this Venus semi-sextile Pluto for you could be pretty positive. Also, we've got Moon trine Jupiter, and Moon trine Jupiter, Jupiter is it's well placed. It's in a high profile part of your chart, and so with this Moon trine Jupiter, there's a lot you can get together. And you don't have to just sort of regard today as just being part of the Christmas experience. You just have to just do nothing. Why not? I mean, it's Christmas. It might be a holiday. I don't think it's a holiday in the United States, but there might be that temptation to do nothing. But Moon trine Jupiter is saying, well, there's some work to be done potentially. And if you are working, or if you're preparing to work, if you have your own business, I think Moon trine Jupiter allows you to take a fortunate activity, do things which are useful. What details matter, and the Moon having made the trine to Jupiter, it starts to make a conjunction to Saturn. Okay, Moon conjunct Saturn as an aspect has a rather difficult reputation, but it does allow you to get things together. And perhaps what can help Libra is having a rather grim approach. Now, you might not think that sounds good, having a grim approach. Librans don't like things that are grim, but there is a place for grimness. And if you think that, well, something has to be done, it's difficult, it may not be interesting, but it's just got to be done. Okay, you could do it next week, but why not do it now? And if you really focus on something important to you, remember also what I said about that Venus semi-sextile Pluto, it's not just something routine, it's also about something that links to your fundamental creativity. And at first it's not easy, but with that grim approach, you just step by step move towards something. You're not necessarily sure what you're moving towards, but it is definitely in the right direction. And as far as today is concerned, you can be sensitive to what's happening, but you don't want to allow things to get chaotic. You're trying to create order, and that may be a key part of what's happening today. Perhaps trying to create order out of chaos, but also being very aware of chaos. You know that chaos exists. You can deal with it. It might seem overwhelming at first, but Libra, if you keep going, maybe in a rather grim way, I think that over the course of the day, things can really start coming together for you, and I think you would be really preparing in a useful way for next week and maybe even for next year. Scorpio. I think Scorpio, it's going to be a pretty good day. I mean, we've got Moon trine Jupiter. So with Moon trine Jupiter, which I'll be talking in detail about this trine between the Moon and Jupiter, we've kind of got a grand trine because we've got Moon in Pisces, got Jupiter in Cancer, and both of them are trining Scorpio. And I know it's not really a grand trine because because there are no planets in Scorpio. But from a Scorpio perspective, there may be a feel of a grand trine, that things are coming together. There's a possibility that there can be fast action, things moving quickly, and you being able to have an impact, and most importantly, to feel happy about it. You can feel good that things are moving, and from an emotional perspective, I think that you're going to be pretty aware of what is going on, and how things are developing. And so there's something about you which is connected, and you're connected on an emotional level. So I think that looks pretty good. And if you want to do something today, I think it's just going to be easier than expected. You might think it's going to be hard work, but as soon as you put in the effort, you start to sort of make things happen, and then things really immediately do happen. And that's the wonder of this Moon trine Jupiter. It's a fortunate aspect, and it's a fortunate aspect that just allows things to happen, for you. And so so it really, don't hold back, and don't allow yourself to be knocked off course, perhaps by other people's negativity. I mean, some people are a little bit negative today, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. So, whatever it is that you want to do, I would just get on with it. And, additionally, Scorpio, you're going to be well aligned. It's always important to be aligned. Now, what do I mean by being aligned? I think you're going to be aligned to the planet Earth at the end of 2025, moving into 2026. You get it all. I think the Moon trine Jupiter, Moon conjunct Saturn, gives you powerful insights into what's happening socially and politically, where the news is leading, where events are leading. You're able to just look forward and just see how things are developing. And because of that, I think the more you can engage with what's happening in the world, I think the better, because everything is connected. You, as a Scorpio, everything is connected. If you read about something happening in a different country, in the end, that might affect you. That may say something about your life. So nothing is irrelevant. Everything's got a point. Everything is interconnected. And if you remember all that, I think that you can have a pretty good Friday. Sagittarius. I'm not convinced that you necessarily want to do anything. I think Sagittarius, you'd just be happiest in your own world, rather like yesterday. And that approach is kind of fitting for this time of year, Boxing Day. For many people, Boxing Day is just an extension of Christmas. Maybe not in the United States. I'm still getting used to American customs. But different countries have different approaches to those 3 days of Christmas. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day. I know that in the UK, at least the last time I had Christmas in the UK, which was a very long time ago. But my last Christmas in the UK was, I think that would have been Christmas, maybe 2002. So that was, that's a long time ago. I haven't had Christmas in the UK for 23 years. But, the last time I had Christmas in the United States, in the United Kingdom, Boxing Day is a pretty dead day. Nothing much happens. I think it's difficult. The transport system is pretty dead. You just have to stay in place. But staying in place, Sagittarius, wherever you are, is probably something you would like to do. Why would you want to do anything else? And so if you have the opportunity to stay where you are, I'd go with it. There may be pressure to do something else, but I think that pressure can probably be ignored. Now, there is a trine aspect between the moon and Jupiter, and this trine is a headline aspect of the day, and I think this moon trine Jupiter it's fortunate, and of course it involves Jupiter, it involves your ruler. So you've got Moon and Jupiter in mutual reception, and I think because of all of that, the best place for you to be in terms of luck and good fortune probably is right where you are. You don't have to go out of your way to have a great day. You don't have to go out of your way to get in contact with good luck, to improve your luck. No, you don't. So everything Sagittarius is just fine as it is, and that, by the way, doesn't mean that you need be passive. I think that Sagittarians can certainly assert themselves if necessary. You're not going to just accept things as they are. If things are wrong, if you don't like the look of something, if you don't like what someone says, sure, you can make your opinions clear. So there's no problems there. So overall, the Sagittarius, I don't think you should struggle too much. I don't think you should do anything you don't want to do. And yeah, other people might regard you as being stubborn, but I don't think you're being stubborn. I think you're being realistic, and you're understanding your own strengths. And the closer to home you are, I think, the stronger you will be. Capricorn. I don't see why it shouldn't be a good day. You've still got those 3 planets in Capricorn: Sun, Venus, Mars. They are making you quite definite. You're quite sure about who you are and what you want. And at the same time, Capricorn, I think you're going to be pretty good at expressing your fundamental message. If there's something you want to say, then I don't think you're going to have any problems saying it. And you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. It's also making a conjunction to Saturn. So, well, okay, that Moon-Saturn conjunction may be more about tomorrow, but you're beginning to feel that Moon-Saturn conjunction. And I think in this context, I think the Moon-Saturn conjunction should be pretty fortunate. And with the moon making a trine to Jupiter, well, that might say something about other people, might say something about relationships. Jupiter is in Cancer, it's in your opposite sign. So if there's something you want to say, I think you can say it. And it might be a quite good day for talking about difficult subjects because of that moon trine Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter, is fortunate, and it can perhaps smooth over things. So something which on the surface might be difficult might actually be quite easy. It's just, the words flow. Maybe there won't be an excessive amount of negativity. Okay, the moon does make a square to Mercury, so moon does square, but that Mercury square might be, there might be moments of irritation. You're perhaps saying something, there's a certain agitation in the air, but then the moon, having made a square to Mercury, it then moves on to making a trine to Jupiter, and then a conjunction to Saturn. Of course, Saturn is your ruler, so things really do come together. So this means perhaps, Capricorn, that you can be assertive without other people necessarily recognizing you're being assertive. And we could see it then as about you being able to quietly get your way. And as when you are with other people, when you've got people you're trying to talk to, engage with, there's something about you that is dynamic. And that dynamism is obvious, and of course it also links to the fact that you've got those three planets in Capricorn. So Capricorn, that may be a lot of what the day is about, especially if you are with other people, if other people matter, if you're working, for example, or if you're in any kind of competitive situation. If you're not in a competitive situation, and certainly if you don't have to deal with other people, if there aren't difficult subjects to talk about, then today I think it's just going to be pretty easy. You can largely do what you want. Don't forget sort of intellectual pursuits, thinking about things, discovering things, new knowledge. There is new knowledge out there. You shouldn't assume that you've got all the answers, and if there's something you don't understand, then Capricorn, I think it would be a great time to be giving yourself that understanding, because the knowledge is available. However you want to find it. Of course, one way of finding out something is to ask someone, to talk to people, but there are other ways. Whether it's books, internet, just listening to your feelings. You can really get to grips with this world, and I think that is something that perhaps you should strive to do. And once you've got the knowledge, then I think that that will be putting you in a good position. So don't feel Capricorn that you have to come up with the big answers. Before coming up with the big answers, you need to understand how the facts of the matter come together, and I think that may be one aspect of today. But overall, Capricorn, I think things are looking good. I don't see anything around to stop you. So whatever your plans are for today, then I think you're going to be able to see them through. But if you can discover new stuff, discover new information, and perhaps also if you can communicate something that you've been struggling to communicate, I think that's something you can do. And that's especially the case if we're dealing with a disagreement. I think disagreements should, if they do exist, disagreements should perhaps be accepted rather than sort of running away from them. And if there is a conflict situation, I get the impression that you are going to be able to manage it very well. Aquarius. Venus is making a semi-sextile to Pluto. Pluto is, of course, moving through Aquarius, and maybe you'll pick up on this Venus semi-sextile Pluto. So how is that likely to work? It could be that there is something or someone you haven't considered. You were thinking about everything from one perspective, maybe your perspective, and there was just something else, and you didn't think it was important. You wanted to maybe concentrate on something else, but maybe it is important. Maybe there's someone you've forgotten, and if there is someone you've forgotten, work out who they are, and it just could be something quite trivial. Maybe you've forgotten to give someone the season's greetings, and getting in touch with one person, even if you don't want to get in touch with that one person, could make a difference. People have memories, and so if you feel that someone is isolated, or you have forgotten someone, try to do something, say something. It may just be a phone call or an email. It's just all it takes is to deal with. Is it a problem? Well, it might be a problem, but everyone wants to feel happy. I mean, that's the main thing. You don't want anyone to feel neglected, and just a bit of effort on your part can solve the problem. And aside from that, we've got a trine between the Moon and Jupiter. I think the Moon-Jupiter trine, from your perspective, is not necessarily a super exciting aspect, but it does seem that small actions on your part can make a difference. And it's kind of like I was just saying about, maybe you've forgotten someone. A small action on your part, picking up the phone, can make a difference. There may be other things, maybe relating to money. some aspect of your finances that may be fine, but it certainly, I think, could be better. And so Moon trine Jupiter, it's a fortunate aspect, and it could be a financially fortunate aspect. And all it requires is for you to just get yourself together, to do something that maybe doesn't seem very interesting. You'd rather be doing something else, but the moment you do it, you've done it, and that's really helping you. You've sorted something out, and you're now ready to take advantage of it. And so perhaps we could say that, you know, preparing might be a good way of approaching today. Preparing for the future, making sure that everything has been sorted out. And I know that doesn't sound very interesting, but that's probably, you know, what today should be about. You know, thinking about the future, thinking how your actions and indeed your non-actions could impact maybe next year. And if there's anything you've forgotten, any way in which you've been negligent, it's okay. You can resolve the problem. You can do it now. And you shouldn't leave it any later. Pisces. Moon is still in your sign, and it's making a trine to Jupiter. And so I think, you know, Moon trine Jupiter, it's the main aspect of the day, I think. And I think that Moon trine Jupiter is a pretty fortunate aspect. I think it's certainly a fortunate aspect for you. You've got, you know, Moon in your sign, Moon making a trine to Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler. Moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. So it should be a day, Pisces, when, you know, things can really move and things can really work for you. And additionally, you can feel a sense of happiness. I mean, why not? Feeling that you're in the right place, you're doing the right things, and, you know, don't forget your creativity, you know, the things that you are good at. You know, this is the overall message of Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter's been in Cancer since the early summer. It's going to stay in Cancer until summer of next year. So, you know, really make the most of Jupiter in Cancer. And I think that the Moon in Pisces making the trine to Jupiter in Cancer is going to help you in this direction. And you have to think about yourself. It's not a time to be worrying too much about other people's demands. I mean, it should all start with you. You're not being selfish. You're just recognizing that right now you're the one who should be taking the initiative, and your ideas are very often going to be the best ideas. And so yeah, if you're good at something, you know you're good at something, then absolutely give it your best. Give it your best, you know, and don't allow yourself to be distracted, you know, particularly by other people. You know, other people might want your attention, or they might be doing stuff which is frankly quite trivial and it is unnecessary, and they might want your engagement with it. But why would you want to bother? So Pisces, you know, do put your priorities first, and by doing that, you'll be giving your own luck, you know, a real boost. And in the process, don't allow yourself to feel too self-conscious. I mean, you could feel self-conscious. You might think you're doing something stupid, you're doing something childish, you're being irresponsible. But if it feels good and it's legal and moral, then I would suggest you keep going with it, because you're on the right track. And you know, with that approach, I think that you can have a great Friday. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 10. which is treading. This has been coming up quite a lot recently. And, treading is about caution. We do not want to tread on the tiger's tail. If we tread on the tiger's tail, the tiger bites us. And so that's not what we want to happen. So it might be today that there is a delicate situation. Something we need to walk past very carefully. And we don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to be too hasty. We must be very careful where we put our feet. And, we shouldn't panic. We shouldn't feel that this is a situation which is so dangerous that we can't negotiate it. We can certainly negotiate it. And we can get through to the other side unscathed, provided we go about things properly, provided we act correctly. And, this hexagram, it has 3 moving lines. The first line moves. So the first line moves is saying something about how we start. And we start the process in a way that is straightforward. We keep it simple. And we start to approach the tiger, whatever it is, this obstacle or this thing that we have to negotiate. And then, we take the right approach up to a point. And then maybe we start to see the tiger stirring. We see that we have contact with a difficult situation. And it seems that we have been spotted, that, perhaps the moment of danger arrives. So the question is, what does one do at the moment of danger? And one approach is to just be brave. Just go through with it. We've made a decision. We're not going to lose our cool. We will keep going. But we should understand that it is a dangerous situation where we could make a mistake. And remember, what kind of situation am I talking about? It could be just completely trivial. Something going on in your home that it's a difficult task. It just could be something that if you make a mistake, I don't know, something might get broken, or it may be some social situation that could be a bit difficult. Whatever it is, and we have to be aware of the danger. It's not necessarily an easy situation, but perhaps if we keep going, we maintain our caution. We can get through, and then the final line moves. The top line moves, and one way of looking at the top lines is that we're just looking back at what we did and what we didn't do, and where we trod, who we upset, who we didn't upset. We look back and we are judged by our actions. If we got it right, we're judged well. If we did it wrong, then it's a different story. Also, if the top line moves, it might be a situation where we decide that enough is enough. We've taken things as far as we can. Top line moves. Perhaps we're close enough to the tiger, and now it's time to return. We return, it's the right time to return, and we haven't caused any damage. And so that's how perhaps this hexagram, comes together. But I do think there is a danger. And I think the fact that there was a danger or is a danger is reflected in the next hexagram. Because of these 3 moving lines, we move to a second hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 40, which is deliverance. And this gives us the idea of perhaps escaping from a difficult situation. Deliverance, something is bad, something could be bad, and maybe by the end of the day we realize that it is a difficult situation, or perhaps we've signed up for something and we're realizing, this isn't a good thing, or we've made an agreement and we're having second thoughts and we're starting to see the dangers. But deliverance is saying there's always an exit. There's always a way to escape. So if we want to escape, if we realize that it's just too challenging, then we very much can. And so I think that 40 deliverance, it is a fortunate hexagram, but it's fortunate because we have an escape. It's not too late. So if you're involved in something that is going wrong, or you have real doubts about it, or you might have made an agreement, you've said you're going to do something, you might feel tied to this agreement by some kind of obligation. Okay, if you've got a legal obligation, that's a different matter, but deliverance, there is an escape. Even if it is a legal obligation, maybe deliverance is saying that if you talk to the right people, if you negotiate, maybe there is a way out. Yeah. So don't feel that you're stuck here, because there is an exit, and it can be a clean exit. And finally, I want to look at the trine between the Moon and Jupiter. I mean, I don't want to say a huge amount about it, but I think it's always a good idea to look at an aspect in detail. I mean, okay, detail, maybe I'm flattering myself here. I'm just talking about one aspect with a couple of examples. And so here is the trine between the Moon and Jupiter. This is the moment it happens. I think it happens London time. It takes place at 5:43 p.m. So that means the Moon trine Jupiter would be earlier in the day if you're in the Americas. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, Moon trine Jupiter might not be until tomorrow. But yeah, if you're in Europe, Africa, the UK, then 5:43. Well, late afternoon, early evening. That's when you have the Moon trine Jupiter. So there it is. Moon at 22 degrees 2 Pisces. Trine Jupiter at 22 degrees Cancer, as I've already said at great length. Both these planets are fortunate. I mean, I know Jupiter's retrograde, but they are in mutual reception, and they're tied up with Saturn as well, because the Moon is making that conjunction to Saturn, and Jupiter and Saturn are still pretty close to the trine. So Moon trine Jupiter, typically it's seen as being fortunate. If someone has Moon trine Jupiter in their chart, that's seen as being a good thing. It means that maybe things should work for them. But it is a trine. I mean, when you've got a trine, things can move quickly, and sometimes too quickly. And so that's perhaps something we need to be careful about, because when there's Moon trine Jupiter, there's no opposition. And if there's no opposition, things can collapse quickly. And there may be an association between Moon trine Jupiter and death. I mean, people often say with Jupiter and death, death is that Jupiter is often highlighted in the chart of a death. Jupiter is about something bursting, the end of something, and it can also be a quick release. I mean, Jupiter can be associated with a quick death. Moon trine Jupiter. And is that fortunate? Well, maybe it's not necessarily completely fortunate, but it's saying that something has to happen. If there's a potential for something happening, it will happen. It can happen, and so you don't have to put too much effort in, and that may be the nature of a Moon trine Jupiter. And you can see, because it's a trine, that a Moon trine Jupiter could be a lazy aspect. Trines are lazy. You don't have to put too much effort into getting the result, and that can make you complacent. So that that can certainly be a problem with Moon trine Jupiter. So what I want to do is I want to look at a couple of examples of Moon trine Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter in terms of events, and hold on, let me just one moment. I just want to make sure that I've got one more aspect that I wanted to see. Okay, so one event I wanted to talk about. I wanted to contradict the idea that I want to contradict myself I have just said that Moon trine Jupiter is associated with a quick and easy death. Well, I want to give you an example of a death which was definitely not quick and easy because of the incompetence of an American executioner, and that was the hangings of the Nuremberg, those sentenced to death, the Nuremberg trials, which took place after the Second World War. So this is the death of Ribbentrop. So Ribbentrop was the German foreign minister during the war, and as with others, he was hanged. I believe that Ribbentrop was the first person to be hanged, and the hangman, I can't remember his name, didn't really know what he was doing, and it wasn't some sort of clean, mathematically perfect hanging, like Pierpoint. If you know about Britain, the death penalty in Britain at the time, you had Albert Pierpoint, who was this expert hangman who did his calculations, and people died quickly. But the American executioner, I don't even know if he'd conducted an execution before. He certainly wasn't very good at it. And his victims ended up sort of strangling them. So they just sort of dangled. It was essentially a short drop hanging. So they took a long time to die. And Ribbentrop was the first to go. And at the time, Moon in Cancer was trine Jupiter in Scorpio. So, in a way, quite a fortunate trine. Moon in Cancer, Moon in its own sign, and as the hanging started. And so, yes, about death, but certainly not about an easy death. Now, you might argue they deserved to have a painful death, but they were sentenced to be hanged presumably in a fairly orderly and structured way, by the book. So there is a chart to sort of completely contradict, what I was just saying as far as events are concerned. Now, when you've got Moon trine Jupiter, things can happen quickly. And another event, which was relatively recent, was the sinking of the Bayesian. The Bayesian was this yacht which was moored off Sicily in 2024, and early in the morning it got sunk by a storm, and it just came from nowhere. And it was obviously a state-of-the-art yacht, and Moon was at 1711 Aquarius, very, very close to a trine with Jupiter. So you could argue here, Moon trine Jupiter, well, maybe it's the air. Was there a lot of wind around? But everything gets exaggerated, perhaps, with Moon trine Jupiter. And so maybe that is why the boat sank so quickly. So this is a reminder that Moon trine Jupiter is not always fortunate. And another event that took place, I think it was in 2024, was the the attack at Pahalgam. No, that was earlier this year. God, I'm losing track of time. So the Pahalgam attack was when Kashmiri terrorists, probably supported by Pakistan, attacked. Made an attack in Kashmir in a city. I think it's a village. I don't know. It's not a very big place, Pahalgam, and so this is a chart for the attack. Again, Moon making a trine to Jupiter. This perhaps gives a rather unpleasant side to Moon trine Jupiter. So if you are planning an attack, and you plan the attack with Moon trine Jupiter, well, maybe your attack will be successful from the terrorist perspective. And so, Moon trine Jupiter, yeah, it's not always pleasant, and it can be connected with death and destruction. Another attack, and it's sort of going back to sort of a German sort of Nazi theme, which took place at the time of the moon trine Jupiter, was the attack on Reinhard Heydrich. So Reinhard Heydrich, he was sort of a leading Nazi. He was in Prague, and he was attacked by resistance fighters. I mean, well, by people dropped in from the UK. I think they were Czech. One was Slovak, and this was the time they attacked him. The moon was at 25 degrees 12 Libra, and Jupiter was at 26:51. So this was an attempt at an assassination, and the assassination worked. I mean, a difficult assassination. It only just worked. The first attempt to kill him, there were two of them. The first attempt, I think the machine gun jammed, and then the second, after that, someone threw a bomb at him, and the bomb blew up, and he got horsehair got embedded in his body, and he died of the infection. So moon trine Jupiter, yeah, can be about a successful attack, but then moon trine Jupiter is not always about successful beginnings. In Poland, for example, the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, which is this huge sort of uprising in Warsaw, the Germans were losing. Obviously, the Soviets were at the gates of Warsaw, so the Polish resistance rose up against the Germans. I think they fought for 6 weeks, but in the end it didn't work. The Russians didn't give them any support. One can perhaps understand why. And the uprising started with moon in Capricorn applying to a trine of Jupiter in Virgo. Now, that might sound good, moon in Capricorn, trine Jupiter in Virgo, but in this case, well, moon was in its detriment in Capricorn. Jupiter was in its detriment in Virgo. So maybe because the moon and Jupiter were in signs where they didn't really work very well, perhaps that gravitated against the Warsaw Uprising's success. And there was another uprising, so that was the Warsaw Uprising on August the 1st, 1944. Then a bit later, at the end of the month, you had an uprising in Slovakia, August the 29th, 1944. Again, moon in Capricorn, trine Jupiter in Virgo. It didn't work. So neither uprising worked. I mean, they didn't just fizzle out. Both of the uprisings continued for quite a long time, but in the end, they were suppressed. So those are a few ideas about moon trine Jupiter. It's not necessarily a guarantee that something is going to work, and we've seen how they can be linked with acts of destruction, with executions, with assassinations, and also with uprisings. So from an event perspective, one perhaps has to be careful about moon trine Jupiter. One shouldn't necessarily think that it is a good thing. And finally, just a couple of people who have moon trine Jupiter in their horoscopes. So one person is Alex Salmond. So Alex Salmond was a Scottish politician. He died quite recently. He was successful up to a point. I mean, he was head of the Scottish National Party, and the Scottish National Party I think he was First Minister in Scotland. So he was a successful Scottish politician. If you looked at sort of interviews with him, he was a very effective communicator. He was very sort of charismatic. He was also clearly overweight. That might have contributed to his early death. I can't remember when he died. He did die a couple of years ago. So I think he died of a heart attack he was lecturing in the Balkans or something like that. And so he had moon in Pisces, trine Jupiter in Cancer. So rather like today. Moon in Pisces, trine Jupiter in Cancer, that is a great trine to have in his chart. and the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. Yeah, and he liked the good things in life. I believe he was something of a bon viveur, and he had success in his life. Moon in the 10th house in Pisces, Jupiter in the sort of first house. You could say it's in the second house, but certainly using Placidus, you might say that Jupiter is in the second. But I think there's a real Jupiter second. When I say Placidus, Jupiter is in the second. I don't know. It's a very short first house. It's a very small first house. When I say Jupiter in the second, no, sorry, I don't know. It's definitely in the first. Sorry, forget that. Placidus, whole sign, whatever. Jupiter's definitely in the first house, and Moon is certainly in the 10th house. Placidus, it would be in the 9th house if you're using whole signs. So I think that he is an example of a politician who really benefited from having Moon trine Jupiter in his horoscope. Another Scottish politician who had Moon trine Jupiter, who's still very much alive, is George Galloway. I mean, to an extent, he's a successful politician. I mean, anyone who gets to be elected a member of Parliament is successful. I mean, it's hard work being elected a member of Parliament. He's been elected member of Parliament on many occasions. Very often what happens is he gets elected, he loses his seat, and then he finds something else to go to. And he was originally a Labour politician, but he moved around, and he has his own party, and he stands as an independent, and it's difficult to keep track of it. But he has a Moon trine Jupiter. Moon in Pisces, trine Jupiter in Cancer. So like George Galloway, like Alex Salmond. So Alex Salmond, in fact, born in the same year as Alex Salmond. So Alex Salmond was born on December the 31st, 1954. George Galloway was born a few months earlier. He was born in the summer of 1954, but he has that same Moon-Jupiter trine. And so Moon-Jupiter may make someone quite spontaneous, and clearly George Galloway is a very effective orator. In terms of the UK, he's him and Nigel Farage in terms of oratory are streaks ahead of anyone else. So Moon trine Jupiter, that moon in the 8th, Galloway is quite capable of showing real anger and outrage. I mean, you saw that when he was talking about the Second Iraq War, when he really got a lot of publicity in terms of attacking the basis on which the Blair regime got involved in Bush's Iraq adventure. So there is that passion to Moon trine Jupiter, and you can look at other things in his chart. He's also got a Sun Pluto conjunction in Leo. But I would have said that Moon trine Jupiter worked quite well for him. So I'd said that Nigel Farage is a great orator. Whatever you think about him, he's charismatic, and Nigel Farage can speak without notes, and so can George Galloway speak without notes. And Nigel Farage indeed has a trine between the Moon and Jupiter. Nigel Farage has his Moon in Sagittarius, very closely trine his Jupiter in Aries. So maybe we're getting an idea that Moon trine Jupiter can be quite good if you want to be a politician, speak without notes, and to be charismatic. And in an American context, I know some of you are not big fans of his, but Barack Obama, likewise, he has got Moon in Gemini, trine Jupiter in Aquarius. And so Obama, okay, his oratory is not at the level of Farage or Galloway, but he's still an effective communicator. And Moon trine Jupiter, it's a lucky aspect, and he's got Moon close to the IC. You could say that his political rise was meteoric, and perhaps he was in the right place at the right time. So yeah, that's, I think, is a good example of Moon trine Jupiter. So looking at that very small sample I've got, I think we could say that if you've got Moon trine Jupiter in your chart, maybe from a political perspective, that might be good news. So politicians with Moon trine Jupiter may have something extra. Perhaps that needs some more research. And finally, King Charles has Moon trine Jupiter, Moon in Taurus, trine Jupiter in Sagittarius. It is a dissociate trine, because you'd expect trines to be in the same element. This one isn't, although it is still close. So Moon trine Jupiter with him. Well, you could say that he's king. I mean, maybe it helps if you're born with Moon trine Jupiter if you want to be king. Is he a great orator? I mean, I don't think he's known for his oratory in a good or a bad way. I mean, Jupiter in Sagittarius. Well, he has Jupiter in Sagittarius, yes, and Jupiter in Sagittarius can be about having strong opinions and him being quite keen to express his opinions, and that's of course something he's always done through his life. He's written letters to government ministers telling him what he thinks, and some have said that he's sort of interfering in politics, but I don't know what you think about Prince Charles. I'm not particularly a fan of his, but he certainly has Moon trine Jupiter. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.